Hola. My Spanish is really bad, but my friends in the front row gave me something to say, which is a statement of appreciation. Apparently, I didn't double check it. ¿Dónde está el supermercado? So, this is the last talk, and I know that we've had some fun over the last 2 days, and so I'm going to try and bring some kind of energy into this thing so that you're not sort of falling asleep necessarily. My name is Hal Kirkland. I am a director and a creative director. Creative director is someone who comes up with ideas, tries to make them happen, makes them happen sometimes, and then manages teams in order to make ideas happen. There's a lot of parallels there. And a director, everyone knows what one of those is. My mother finally knows exactly what I do when I say that. So that's probably half the reason I became one. So this is me with some paper in the air, which they're like symbolize ideas. They're blank sheets of paper. So I'm just going to quickly tell you where I began, because all of us, anyone who's interested in this amazing field of virtual reality, has come from all of these different places. I've had a lot of chance to experiment in things. A lot of that has involved really hard work. I started off as a designer. I designed Fruit Loops boxes, which was a lot of fun. Actually, it's not that fun. Because just, it's like, Fruit Loops boxes, this is going to be the best. And then you have to design this. So I colored in some bananas. I set some things on fire and took some photos. I did some advertising with some billboard sort of stuff for Chrome. I worked with Vice News briefly and YouTube. I worked with this guy who was a lot of fun. He turned up to set at 2 p.m. in the afternoon instead of 8 a.m. And he was stoned, but he was actually really, really lovely. And he's really tall. And he has really, really thin ankles. Worked with this fine young lady. And then, so like a lot of this was from moving from design into advertising. So I worked in advertising for like over a decade, maybe 12 years. And then in the meantime, I was started to make some music videos. So I made some music videos which had no money. I had a full-time job, made these music videos. I wish I could share them, but time's running out and it's already running out. So we're gonna stick to the VR thing, but I started to experiment, and money really wasn't that important when you're coming up with ideas, and I think that that's a pretty big learning. So I made some music videos, one of them did quite well, and then that kind of started to go, I started to think, maybe I could be a director, And so I came across this statue in Universal Studios in Los Angeles, and then I was realized that I kind of almost look like this guy, and then I was I'm going to become a director because of this. Because then, once I do, I can tell everyone that that was made of me. So anyway, this guy came along. You might know him as Elon. I know him as Mr. Musk, because him and I aren't on first name basis yet. And so he had this quote, which was, "There's a 1 in a billion chance that we're not living in a computer simulation already." The Matrix explored this idea about the fact that, who knows, we might be in the middle of a simulation. And I always thought that this was a pretty funny idea. And so then I thought, when VR came around, I was thinking, well, I better get into VR as soon as I can so that I can learn about the simulation that I'm in. And then, that eventually led to joining this company called Hebe Dragons. That was a bit of sort of a chance event, but I was just working on ideas that were failing, the ideas that didn't quite work because I didn't understand the medium. But what I did was Googled it, read about it, asked some questions, and that's pretty much almost how I've entered every single career or discipline, is just by researching. So anyway, Hebe Dragons is a production company, a VR production company in LA. And there's a bunch of really cool people. It's not really that big. And there's a lot of EPs, there's directors, there's a lot of VFX specialists. Actually, a lot, there's like 2. and then there's a couple other people underneath them. But yeah, I mean, we really try to make something that meaningful stories is the thing that we hit first. You have to make a meaningful story. I keep on repeating that. Everyone's like getting sick of me maybe saying that, but it's really important. And because of those meaningful stories and those human connections is why we've been fortunate enough to win a couple of things. And so we really try to maintain that. So, you know, we do things for movies and TV shows sometimes. And we still we stay true to the property. This is Mr. Robot. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And when we launch these projects, we're not just making the film. We're thinking about ways to get it in front of people. So in this particular thing, this was happening at South by Southwest. We made vans and we kind of like abducted people, put them in the van. Might not go over so well in certain countries. And then we recreated this room, Elliot's room from the show, and we put VR headsets on people there, so it really felt as though you're in the set and you're experiencing it. You put the headset down and boom, you're in that room and you're mixing reality. So we have a whole bunch of directors. Some of these guys haven't made VR yet. Maybe the term is VR curious. And so what I try to do is try to bridge that gap, because I have experience in directing and creative directing, so I work with these guys to come up with something great. Some of them, we have different teams, so you know, sometimes they jump into it themselves. Yeah, it's exciting. So here's a reel from Hebe Dragons, just to give you a bit of a taste for the kinds of mayhem we get into. Oh yeah, because I'm meant to be talking about this. Wait a minute. Video playing.
Where are we going exactly?
It's a surprise, but a pleasant surprise, methinks. You have to follow me, so come, young Elliot.
You're in for a ride.
I heard that, Santa.
Don't worry so much, Beth. Let's see some sights. Giddy up, boys!
North Pole, we have liftoff.
Nice talk. Oh, watch what this button can do.
And now there can be no turning back, even if you might want to.
Oh, Penny, look at the earth.
Wow.
Tens of millions of dollars are spent every year looking for signs of intelligent life in the universe. But there's already intelligent life in the universe. And it's right here.
We think of many of our robots as being biologically inspired. We look at the things the animal can do and then say, okay, how can we, using human-made engineering techniques, build something that begins to approximate that?
And I remember I started seeing the face appearing between buildings and then his legs, and I was like above it, and I was like, whoa. It's just another story.
That mesmerizing eye thing totally worked. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have clapped. So anyway, yeah, that eye is the reason why I'm here. So like I was making a bunch of, I'd say, traditional film, and I started working in interactive film and starting to work on some complex branching stories, and I put together a music video for Led Zeppelin, and it was 17 films happening simultaneously. You could kind of jump into and out of the album of Physical Graffiti, move through the walls and floors, and that kind of started to be training ground for me a little bit. And so yeah, so like this medium came around. So as Scorsese says himself, cinema is a matter of what's in the frame and what's out. So what happens when the frame completely disappears and you can see everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about 3 particular projects that I directed and creative directed. And they're 3 very different projects. One of them is Kids, a music video for One Republic. The other one is a sponsored content piece for GE. It's an experiment. And the other one is a narrative piece. So through all of these different films, like I learned a whole bunch of stuff about a medium that up until that point it was truly trial and error almost. So this is my reel, so that you have a good idea about the kinds of visuals in the project. Good times. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the first project. This is One Republic Kids, so this is the first VR piece I directed. I was sitting at a desk working on something else, and a director that was working on this particular project, it had been in the wings for quite a few months, and they couldn't do what he wanted to do, and he walked. Like he's like, oh yeah, because he had to come up with a new idea by the next day. And fortunately, he walked, and I was like, I'll do it. And that was a good move, I think. And yeah, so there was a whole bunch of sort of challenges with his brief, straight up. Yeah, so actually, before I go into that, these are the learnings actually that I'm going to talk about. And this is something that you all face all the time with VR. And one of them is narrative versus spectacle. So it's like how to tell a story when everything is so amazing. And so at the moment, the audience is very young, like sort of immature to some degree because we're not used to it. You put down the headset and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. And so suddenly you're missing story beats. And if you miss the story beats, then you don't understand the film. And if you don't understand the film, then what's it worth? So the other two are protagonist versus spectator. There's a big debate about should you play the role, should you be looking through the protagonist's eyes, or should you just be witnessing it from this other camera and another perspective? This is just a creative choice. Some people think it's a debate. It's not. It's just a creative choice. I think everyone, when VR was invented, they thought, oh, well, because you're looking around, surely you have to be the person, but clearly you don't. Tightly choreographed freedom. I think this is really interesting. It kind of plays into narrative versus spectacle, because you give the illusion of freedom and you say, you can look wherever you want, but actually you should be looking here and you should be moving this way. And so it's the director's job, if they still, want to direct this particular piece, to really choreograph that and make it interesting as well. So this is the guys, One Republic. They're a big, really big American band. I wasn't necessarily, I didn't listen to a whole bunch of their music beforehand, but I have listened to this particular song more than anyone else in the world. And so the song is, it's called Kids. It's about being kid-like, embracing that idea. Perks of Being a Wallflower is a movie that they were referencing. I hadn't seen that either, and I didn't watch it because I was doing my own idea anyway. So challenges. So anyway, I came up with this idea because this brief landed on my desk at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And I was like, should I do this? I've got until tomorrow. And then I came up with this idea, sketched it up. 2 hours later, I presented it to some people, and they were like, oh yeah, but we can't build that set in Mexico City. And I was like, why is it in Mexico City? And they go, well, they're paying for part of it. And I was like, oh, so I had to start again at 7 p.m. that evening, which wasn't fun. Then we had to use this, which actually turned out to be a really good camera, but I didn't know anything about this camera because I hadn't used it before. But just like anything, you jump in and you figure it out, you Google it and ask people who know something about it. Luckily, that's not necessarily my department. And the other challenge was that I had to do a VR piece, 360, and a 2D piece. So I had to shoot one music video one day and then one music video the next day. So that was a bit of a mind-melting scenario. So, and the other thing was clients. So every single person in this room is going to deal with clients. They are a client, or everyone deals with them. So I had a couple on this one. So I had One Republic. I had to make sure those guys were happy. I had Nokia Ozo, the camera. I had Interscope Records, the label. I had the people that were kind of overseeing them, Universal Music. I had the City of Mexico. I had Vizio, which was a speaker that they just decided to put into one of the music videos. And then Fiat, on the last day, they said, oh yeah, Fiat wants their car in the middle of it, and we sold some space in this thing. So strategically, what I did was I just pushed everything into the traditional music video. I was like, that sounds great. Oh, Fiat? Yeah, I love those cars. You know what? We should put that in the front of the 2D music video. Or we should put that speaker in the front of the 2D. So if you ever do see the normal music video, it looks like an ad in the front because there's so many product placements. So research. So, I hadn't been to Mexico City. Googled it again. This is an ad for Google, maybe. I'm getting 50 cents every time I mention it. And so I noticed that, there's streets, they have these little balconies, and there's this really interesting relationship between looking through a window. It's also, the music video is about kids, so I was thinking, yeah, maybe there's a story between two people, and they're in the rooms, and they're noticing each other through these windows, and there's this cute little story happening. So I just drew this, and it was kind of like I'd thought of what the story might be and what the technicalities are simultaneously. But this gave me the plan. It was move the camera from the boys' room across the street and into the girls' room, and then back again. And then we could tell the entire story just by moving the camera back and forth. And so I was aiming for to do a single take, just because. Why not? I don't know. Why not? I mean, if it sounds cool. And then the street offered me a different set for the second day to do a one take up the road. So this to me made sense. I showed it to my technical director, and he was like, "Don't do it." And I was like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "Well, you shouldn't move the camera like that." I was like, well, what if we did move the camera like that? And he's like, no, you shouldn't do it. And he took me aside, he's like, you should move the camera like that. And so anyway, I was like, let's just test it. So anyway, sold in this idea, made one of these guys, a deck, wrote a story, and then yeah, sold it in somehow, and they're like, oh, is this possible? And I was like, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I mean, we just move the camera back and forth. I mean, how hard could it be? And so I went scouting, and I grabbed this like little camera thing, which I'll just like use now because I get to take a photo of every single one of you simultaneously, and I've always wanted that. Smile. Hands up. Yeah, that's more like it. Hi. So that was fun. I started scouting. I mean, that's the thing. You got to like get in there and try and figure out your space. That's very handy, that thing, because if you're working in VR. And so anyway, one thing I discovered with the use of this particular camera is the fact that whenever you take the photo, you end up looking like some sort of like grumpy old man. And so like watch out for that. It doesn't have anything in the instructions or the warning section about that. So, and sometimes you grow a moustache, so watch out for that one, ladies. So I found this wonderful location. I mapped it, so I was still working towards this template. And then so I found this place, and it was these, I had these two areas. And this was like a really interesting space because even though I was trying to figure it out, it gave me this like sort of wonderful thing where part of the story was happening there, the street was here, and then another part of the story was here, which meant that I could tell the story in one room and there was nothing else to look at. And then I go outside, you can look at whatever you want. And then you go back inside the room and there's just this story to follow. So I'll explain a little bit about that. So like we attached a cable, we bolted it into the walls, and we had it on this rig thing. Dactyl rig. I called it a rig thing on the shoot because I didn't know what it was for a while. So lingo isn't one of my things. And limiting focus is like what I was kind of getting at before. But this is like really important. Like fortunately, we had windows that weren't in the center of the room. They were actually back against the wall, and so that meant that all of my action could be happening in front of the camera. And then behind, it was just a wall, so like you're not going to look back. And then if you did look back out here, the natural perspective of the corridor, made it look like 3D. And so it was kind of like the perfect storm. Like when I found this location, it was like a holy moment. Like it was like sun rays coming through the clouds, and I was like, oh my God, this is meant to be. And it was. And so this is kind of, this is the camera movements that are coming from these spaces. And so it really changes the dimension. Suddenly you're like hovering like I really hope that you guys get a chance to see this. You can find it on the app within. And so in order to figure this out, I really kind of like had to figure out the crazy timing, and I made this thing, and like I distribute it to the crew. But this is like submitting Egyptian hieroglyphics to most people. But the thing is, I was like, does everyone understand? And they're like, yeah, of course we understand. What are you talking about? Like, yeah, we're professionals. And then I figured out, after asking them some questions, that nobody actually understood anything. So the key learning is that never assume anyone knows what you're talking about. Ever. Ever. Like, even now I'm kind of like going, well, no one's listening. Key learning number 2 is the only way that you know what you're talking about is through investigation and by doing the work yourself. So always be prepared by actually doing the work yourself and figuring it out. You can't trust that anybody else will get it. And hopefully someone else will get it. So anyway, I did these things. So I was trying to help the crew. So I started drawing these cartoons and planning every single piece of action. And this was like it wasn't a traditional way to solve this. But it was the best way for me. And this is like a normal sort of story beats. So this is normal storyboard, and this is like this top down, and this has started to make sense for me. So I started to plan all of this different stuff. And Yeah, and so meanwhile, everyone was going for celebratory drinks because everyone was starting to understand what we're actually doing. And this is me, 2 a.m. in the morning, still scribbling so I could give this thing so everyone would actually understand what I was doing. I think part of the reason this project even happened was because no one actually did understand, and they didn't know how complex it was, because if they did, there's no way they would have approved it. So another key learning is every single time I was suggesting things, people were saying, no, that's not possible, which is really funny. Like, some of my team members were very, very helpful and supportive, but other people, they were just like telling me no all the time. So it is easier to sound like an expert by saying something that isn't possible. That's a really key point, because people will just, can we do this? No, it's never been done before. You can't do it, and you just got to ignore that. And I've kind of ignored that most of my career. And so the learning is really don't accept no, and always test it. Always test it yourself. If someone says no, we go, we'll just test it. We'll just test it. We'll we'll just film something. And then we're like, no, we shouldn't do that. We go, we just, I don't know, we'll get someone to get a camera, we'll go outside, we'll do something. Always do that. And you don't have to hunch your shoulders like this. That's just my technique. That's what I look like when I'm trying to get someone to test it. Say, it's fine, it's fine. My voice goes higher. And so this is a test that I did. I got someone to actually do, because everyone was worried about being sick when you went out the window. Like, oh my God, it's going to make me sick. It's going to make everybody sick. Everybody's going to be sick. Anyway, we got this done and no one was sick. So, quelle surprise. So yeah, so these are the kind of camera moves. And little known fact, that is an actual paper aeroplane. Okay, it's not. It's CG. It looks good though. 2D film, so I had to film the 2D film the next day, the traditional one. We call it, I hate to say this, it's called a flatty. You know how insulting flatty is to the entire industry of cinematography? Oh, it's flatty. Anyway, so we kind of heard it at a conference and we would joke about it, but then we started calling it that and we were all like, oh my God, we became what we hate. So anyway, crude sketches for that one because time was running out. Actually, this is just me trying to figure out something when the band changed the length of the song, the day of the shoot. Same kind of techniques, top down, figured out all the different stages of what the shoot would be, and then filmed this thing, made it nighttime to make it look different, still did a one take kind of through this thing, and then eventually a storm came and wiped everything out, but luckily I got the last shot just as this 50-year storm hit and almost obliterated the entire suburb. And so yeah, this is another one. I'm just going to kick through it fast. I wonder how much time I have. So yeah, well, someone will shuffle me off stage if I'm running out of time. Oh, is that someone's alarm to get me off stage? That's very subtle. It's interactive. Yeah. Someone actually just said it. I was like, I wonder if I'm out of time. They're like, quick, set the alarm. So anyway, yeah, Impossible Mission. So this was a company called BBDO, an advertising agency in New York. They reached out to us and the creatives had this big idea, and it was this campaign which was you use popular sayings like fighting fire with fire, and you translate that. And they had this huge cool campaign and everything, and so they came to us and we go, we need a VR thing for that. And so the brief that came into me was extinguish a 50-foot sculpture on fire with sound waves. I was like, okay, well, yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable. Anything else? And they're like, bonus point, sound waves must be created from the sound of fire. Okay, so that's cool, yeah. And then I saw this picture that was in their presentation, and I've been to Burning Man, and that fire is not going out, and it's with anything with 10 fire engines dropping on it from 30,000 feet, it's not going out. So I was like, how do I create the tension why don't we just set a guy on fire? And so, see, why don't we just set a guy on fire instead, instead of building this thing? So I started designing some things, like not knowing anything about the science, some crazy contraptions. This thing, which I think still potentially works as like a time traveling machine or something like that. Anyway, we did these tests because GE didn't have the budget to actually give the scientists enough research time, and we had to do it in 2 weeks, so it was like a bit of a stress. And so we were doing tests with sound, and sound wasn't working. Anyway, we worked with these guys, and these guys said, why don't you try a ring vortex generator? We were like, okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. And so we found one, because we'd seen one online, and it was like this big. And we're like, okay, well, we'll try and use one of those things, but we'll make ours slightly bigger. And so we made these bad boys. And this is how they worked. Yeah, so those basically whip sound frequencies, and they go through like this drum thing, which is like a silencer, but the opposite, I guess. Like a noisemaker thing, cylinder. And then it shoots air and puts it out and pushes flame away from the source. So anyway, I started designing these things, and people were like, oh, so how many do you think you need? And I was like, 14. I'm going to need 14. And they're like, oh, okay, are you sure? Is that enough? And I was like, yeah, it's going to be fine. And anyway, I don't know. I have no idea how many I actually needed, but 14 they managed to approve, so I was like, yes. So anyway, which leads me to this point. So when I was filming this thing, it's very much a choreography. So I was imagining it as a one take, even though I didn't really want to shoot it as a one take. But the one take allowed me to think, how would like a camera just move from this scene to film this, to follow around like this, because you're really choreographing the audience, because you're actually like planning on which way they're looking, and there's a way to control things. Everybody says there isn't, and everybody's like, yeah, but you can look anywhere. I mean, you can, but it's up to directors who want people to look somewhere to like do their job. So it's a linear story in every direction. These are some crude things I drew on a toilet wall, but they're up here now as well. They worked for this film as well. And then so I was planning one thing at a time. So it's like the professor walks in front of you, he leads you over to here, fire goes off here, fire goes over there, fire goes over there, and suddenly we're back to your North Point. So got someone else to draw that sketch who could actually draw, and made some fun things. And then, we made this thing. Someone designed it, put it together, and this random theory of mine, a non-scientist, was put to action, and we were hoping that it worked. And we found out that we can only set this guy on fire 5 times, because that's how many times we could afford. I also subsequently set fire to him at my birthday, but I got all my friends to chip in. It was a pretty wild party. And then VR is very much inviting people into things. So we let you let people feel, like you invite people into it. Because before we set someone on fire, we want you to feel the tension of the boom, 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 boom. And you're also using binaural sound, so you're hearing it, and it's pretty intense. We were worried about these things melting bones, as in the force of these frequencies, they were going to melt him somehow. But they're not that powerful at all, and they should not be used commercially to put out flame, just saying. Just in case you want to build one of these things for your backyard. We set this guy on fire. And it worked. It actually, the different things put out different parts of the fire simultaneously, and we put out the flames, and we were like, so it was it was a good time. And I've only got a short amount of time, I think, left, but I'll just briefly talk about this one. This is narrative. So this is an experiment in narrative. I wrote the script, And we really kind of tried to figure out what it was. And it was pretty complicated scripts because it jumped through time. It was about two friends that were sort of remembering all of these memories from all of these live events, from concerts to mosh pits to all of these things, all of the live events that made them become friends in the first place. And yeah, so we're telling the story. So like, it was really tricky because what I wanted to do, because we had a little bit more money on this one, was to make every single scene amazing and to explore live performances in a way that we hadn't, and no one had ever seen before. But then at the same time, there's a story to tell and you need to understand what's happening. So it was really, really, really challenging. So we're creating scenes with like over 150 people and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, like, so you can see, like, I really try and fill the 360 with visuals. And then what I try to do is I'll give you everything and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, you probably might not say that. Maybe it's in Spanish, or maybe it's actually just like, yeah, this is cool. Or, you know, or maybe it's like, I hate being in this experience, maybe. But hopefully not. And then what I do is I try to, like, you're in it, and then as you saw before in the video, you see the entire stage, and then the curtain goes up, and the only thing you can look at is this girl, and she's in front of you. And then she looks around you, and you're like, wait, what's she looking at? And there's someone there, and she lights a fuse, and the fuse goes all the way away. And then you're on to the next scene. So it's like this really tight choreography of following story. And so, yeah, this is another piece that looks really good in 3D, but it was a way of telling a deeper story by like having pictures tell the story. So this is a really complicated scene as well because it had like 250 people in this like thing, and it was a nightmare. We also had smoke that we had to stitch, which was interesting, and then the sun was going down, and we like only had 10 minutes left, and I was like, oh my God, I hope we get this shot. And luckily we did. So anyway, so last thoughts for curious makers, that's you guys, hopefully. So you're gonna ask yourself why your story demands to be in VR. So you've got your story, it's fantastic. You know, why this medium? Because there's so many stories that we get presented and they're just like, oh yeah, I mean, this is cool, this is a great story, but it's better told in a rectangle or a flatty. The other one is ask yourself what you can bring to the medium. You know, is there a skill or something that you've learned? Are you a designer? Are you anything? Are you a writer? Do you like music? Whatever. What is something that you can start to elevate this medium? You know, something that you can explore, like think of some new way of seeing it, a new perspective. Another one is embrace the unknown, but while doing your homework. So this is really important. It's like every single project that you're going to be doing in this medium is going to be brand new territory for you. But you really need to get your homework done. You really can't count on anybody else to figure it out. Fingers crossed you have a good team and they'll help you. And yeah, so like VR in general is an industry that rewards people who dive in face first. You just have to get into it. You have to figure it out. Ask questions, ask people that you trust, do some sketches, write a script, whatever. Just like do something if you're interested in it. That's really all you have to do. And finally, good luck in the simulation. Good luck.
Bravo. Gracias, Hal. Thank you so much. And you're here. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, bueno. Okay. Tenemos un cortito tiempo.
We do not have that much time, but we'll open the floor for questions. Do you have any questions? Any questions from the audience? Yeah, don't be shy. I'll shoot first. Tell me, Hal. Are you working on something else, on VR 360? What's your next step? What are you thinking about? Any new project with a new narrative?
Yeah, there tends to be there's a trend happening at the moment which is moving into gaming engine and interactive experiences. I'm kind of starting to move into that, or at least my next two projects are within that realm. As much as I'd also like to spend a couple of years really perfecting one thing, this industry is changing so rapidly, so you really have to keep on learning and learning. So yeah, the next two projects is a short film, an interactive short film in a gaming engine in Unity, and then the other one's like an augmented reality piece. So I think you've just got to, once you kind of get an understanding of physical space within a film sense, then it's just a matter of learning, trying to get a basic understanding of the technology and then just coming up with ideas.
Very well. Questions? Questions for Hal, please. Come on. No questions? Yeah, here. Over there. Hi. You just talked about narrative, and that's important to follow the thread in any VR shooting. Do you think this can be transferred to cinema, and should it be transferred to cinema as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to follow the story and follow the thread. I mean, I think to your point of learning, maybe like the point of learning from VR and translating learnings from that into cinema is interesting because I had to, that music video is a good example where in planning and knowing the space, because I needed to understand it from a three-dimensional standpoint, it gave me new ideas of how I was going to actually film in the normal music video the next day. So yeah, I think like skills learnt in both mediums transfer.
Bien. Adelante.
Hi. I have a question related to what you said. If cinema is a collective experience, how do you think you could translate VR to a collective experience when there's not one person that controls what you see, but you can break the screen because there's a lot of people seeing in cinema as spectators?
What was the first part? I think there's one word I missed.
Like in cinema, there's a collective experience, so how would you translate the VR experience to a group of spectators that want to see different things at the same time, and there's not one user that chooses what to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's like I've worked in a lot of interactive cinema. It's interactive cinema you're talking about, right? Yeah, it's like, there's a lot of that already. There's so many kinds of formats of that, and I think that you've just got to, if you're seeing two things at the same time or you're given a choice, then that choice needs to be meaningful. Like it needs to be meaningful for the story and to move onto the story. It can't just be a choice. Like it can't be, oh cool, there's a decision, because that's been done way back when, like since the beginning of filmmaking, I think, but giving people a reason to make a choice is really important.
Okay, un aplauso para Hal.
Okay, let's give Hal one round of applause. Thank you, Hal.
Muchísimas gracias.
I also just want to say a really quick thank you to Damien and Mediamorfosis and all of the other speakers and all of you guys, because like it is just such an amazing, amazing festival, and it's been so personally inspiring for me, meeting all of you and hearing what the speakers had to say and meeting Damien, and like massive thank you to all of you. So.
Gracias. Un monstruo. Gracias.